Hi, and welcome to Jung at Harp. Today we're going to talk about richness. Yes, I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and a performer, and I play the harp. And this is Kathleen Wiley. She's a Jungian analyst, and she plays the harp. And so this is called Jung at Harp, and we are looking at these ideas through the lens of music and through the lens of Jungian analysis. So, Kathleen, I'm really fascinated with the idea of richness and what it is. Richness in food, richness in our lives, richness in general. And so what do you have to say about that? How do we get rich quick in terms of being rich in our human experience?
We realize the importance of who we are and the human instrument. We talk a lot about that in playing the harp or whatever your instrument is, that when you get it, that there's the inner harp, then your relationship to the outer harp shifts in a positive way. And so the esoteric spiritual traditions and Jungian analysis, I believe, affirms this, is that the human being is the most diverse, talented, resourceful instrument there is on earth. And yet we don't get training in grade school about how to use the instrument of the human we are. We get training about how to use the instruments of science or the tools of mathematics or the instruments of the home with home economics or what used to be home economics.
Right.
But the most important instrument we have, which is our own humanness, we don't get training in. So the first thing I think about when I hear the word richness is I think about the richness of our own being, the richness of our own soul, that we can only access through the development of our personal self.
So this is immediately when you started talking about this, I started thinking about value, which I believe we talked about last week. And when I think about value, I start thinking about foundation and groundedness. Because that's, we've talked about all these things, that feeling value in ourselves means that we feel our own center of gravity. And our center of gravity is our value, being able to actually experience our value. And then last week, we also talked about how to see that in music, that the beat itself and reconnecting to that beat brings us value. So I'm hearing you talk today about, I'm seeing this like almost like an oil well, where as we dig down into that, we sink that in and we go down, what comes gushing out?
Yes, is our soul.
Right.
Yeah, is our essence that I believe is divine in nature and has all the riches in the world that we would ever need.
Okay, so I was just about to say, and unlike oil, we don't have to refine it, but
but we do.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So what does that mean, to refine the raw value or the...
Well, I think it starts with defining the raw emotion and the raw impulses that come up in us. That as we can begin to look at whatever the raw emotion is or the raw impulse, meaning the one that comes up that's unbridled, that feels like the bulldozer or the whirlwind that's going to take us over, as we can begin to relate to that and harness it, then we have a tremendous motive power. We have a tremendous fuel to direct consciously where we would like to direct it. But if we aren't conscious of it, if we don't have a relationship to it, we don't have an ability to influence it to go in a certain direction. It's just going to go whatever direction it wants. So again, the primitive anger that comes up and dissipates in a temper tantrum. Well, the temper tantrum doesn't get anything you want.
Right.
Try telling the 2-year-old though.
Right.
So that's an example of raw, unrefined emotion that comes up. that as we get older and we can begin to say, oh, there's that impulse to stomp and shout and break things. That isn't going to get me what I want. And we begin to have an ability to relate to it and then say, okay, but how can I use this energy to take the actions that will help me get what I want?
That's so funny because I never thought that until this moment. I mean, I would just have a temper tantrum.
Right. Yeah, lots of people do. and, you know, unfortunately, what happens is after that discharge, there is kind of a release that people associate with feeling better. But the problem is that it's a release that does not get you the satisfaction of the need or the desire.
So you don't actually become richer. You've just discharged. Why does it feel better?
Well, because there's a physiological charge that comes up, or somatic innervations. You know, the body gets revved up.
Somatic innervations. I'll ask you to define that.
Yeah, that's the fancy word to say body sensations.
Okay, like a sneeze. You sneeze, it feels great afterwards, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like if someone's got a raw anger coming up, then there's probably their heart may be racing. You know, they may feel themselves short of breath. They may feel like this rise of heat coming up their body to their head, like their head's going to blow off. You know, see people sometimes say that. So then they blow off their head. They rant. They rage.
And it's resolved, and then that's.
And it's a resolved.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
It's I see. It's released. I just keep thinking of the Beverly Hillbillies and the, you know, black gold, Texas tea, and all this black, you know, and just all these images I used to see as a kid of, like, you know, the oil well, boom, yay, and how completely useless. If somebody gave me a barrel of crude oil, it's completely useless. And I think it's really interesting to be talking about this at a time when we're really looking at alternative forms of energy. And what I'm experiencing is this is an opportunity for us to look at the alternative form of energy that is us.
Yes.
And that is what's important to us and of value to us.
Yes, absolutely.
And yet we can actually look at the oil wells. Okay, so if somebody gave me that, if I was given Texas tea and, you know, whatever, it would be icky. I mean, I would just be like, whoa, what do I do with this? So let's talk about the refining process in human. Oh my gosh! So we all have that in us. We all have that gusher.
Yes.
And it's a matter of actually sinking it down into it. And then once we connect to that energy, refining it in a way that it can then power the things that are important to us. Or, I mean, what would be the mechanical analogy there?
Yes, to power the things that are important to us, to power and create the forms that it will most fully express. I'm thinking about your song, The Nightingale, and I don't know exactly what emotion for you that conveys, but for me, I just feel the tender love of a mother and that wonderful, all of the positive things we associate with mother, the tenderness, the holding, that care and affirming. Even as I've been saying it, I'm feeling it in my body. And you took all of that experience of your mother and you let that flow into what became this beautiful piece of music that constellates those emotions for people when they hear it.
Right. And as you're saying that, and I'm thinking about the mechanism that led to the opportunity to do something that felt seamless at the time. In order to get to that point, I learned how to play an instrument. I practiced it. So I did all of those things. And I think the most important thing that I did was to connect with how I can play it. So meaning, I didn't try to, this piece is one of the simplest pieces I've ever written. It's easy to play. It's simple. The structure is simple. So it's not like I created a masterpiece, and I, crafted it. That wasn't the mechanism. The mechanism was being able to accept what I can do or could do at the time, and then connecting that to my emotion. Mm-hmm. So I know, because I've seen people who don't play harp at all come to a harp knowing that they don't play it, not trying to play it, but getting emotion out of it and being able to express emotion. Then I see when they start to learn, they're like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. They lose connection with that. Yeah. And one of the things that I try to teach in my academy and in all my work, and I try to teach myself, is I believe there is a way to have and express and share that peak experience at any point along the trajectory of technical ability. Right. If you can actually sink into and believe in the value of the ability that you have right now. And that seems to be the really difficult thing. Is I think it's some kind of consumerism in terms of ability. Like, I gotta be better, and never actually in getting the richness out of where we are right now and what we're able to do right now.
I absolutely agree. And I would say the same thing is true for us as we live our lives day in and day out. The main culprit here that I believe our culture promotes, that's part of the problem, is this whole mentality of compare and compete. Compare yourselves to this person. Let's compete over here. Who's the best? Right. And so I think that when we come to an instrument, or we look at how we're going to live our lives and the choices we're going to make about our own exercise routine, or whether we bake bread for the neighbor, or, how we use our time, how much time we spend in front of the TV or computer, instead of touching into that deep energy of one's own nature and what you want to express, we've been trained to say, oh, well, what are they doing? Well, I should be doing that too. And so I think that part of the gift you're giving people in the academy is to say, look, you don't have to play like me or anybody else. Play like yourself. I've heard you say this multiple times.
Yeah, and easier said than done. And
absolutely.
And I just realized, I was just thinking, one of the things I've always thought about humans, like, well, humans don't have instincts, or they do have instincts or whatever. I always thought, well, humans have the instinct to copy. If they didn't have the instinct to copy, we wouldn't learn language, because mothers say hi. There's no reason a cat's not going to say hi back to you, but a human does. So there is something instinctual I can only train my cat through food. That's his language. But human beings can learn through other things. So the satisfaction of copying, and I see that in my academy. So if I'm playing the harp, and not even in the academy, just anytime I'm playing music, like when I used to play with my ex's kids, everybody loved it when we were in a call and response situation. I play something, you play something, I play something, you play something. That's why the blues is so powerful for that call and response. So it's such a satisfying thing to copy. And I know that there's times, like when I was a kid, when I was like, I look good because I look like that person, not realizing I didn't look like me. So we've got that. The power of copying and comparing, because it is part of our power. It gives us a way to learn, and then it gets in the way of us sharing who we are.
Yes. And, I'm thinking about language and Chomsky's studies. It's funny, this went through my mind this morning as I was getting dressed for some reason. The synchronicity, I guess I was in the field. We were already together, DHD. Right. But, Chomsky did research and said that we're born with kind of innate language structures, that then when we hear the language, it activates that innate structure where we can imitate it. And so what you're talking about copying, I think there are different levels of that. There is a level where there's kind of an instinctual template or blueprint that gets activated as we're exposed to it. So in learning, it looks like we're copying, but there's a deeper mechanism at work, and that there's something innate already in us that's being called forth.
And that makes sense, because we're hearing language in the womb. It's not like we don't listen until we get out. Yeah.
That's right. So I think there's a level of copying like that, which is where we begin to delve into the richness of who we are. When we keep the copying at the level of ego and outer world persona of, oh, I've got to do it like she does it to be good. Like I've had in fact, 2 people in the last 12 hours say to me, I'd love for you and DHC to play the harp on your videos. And I'm like, that would really be a stretch for me. And so John this morning says, well, maybe you all need to talk about that. But the heart of that is my own insecurity from comparing myself. You know, and so it's not trusting that I would bring a richness that I imagine would be far more simplistic than your richness
that's interesting.
And structure. And so here we are seeing the limitation of the ego and our conscious self thinking we need to copy. However, there is that innate structure where as we hear and imitate, something innate gets woken up. And so I think as we learn something, and particularly an instrument, it's a fine line we walk there.
Yeah, well, I thought so many things while you were talking. First of all, I was thinking about, at what point does imitation become comparison?
Right.
And then the other thing I thought about is, like, when I was a kid, one of my heroes was Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots, you know, puts on her boots. She can walk seven leagues. She can do all this stuff. All she got to do is put her boots on. So I always wanted to wear boots. I always loved wearing boots, because I feel like Puss in Boots when I'm in. And so I don't know. So there's something about that imitation. It gives me something in myself. And then that other thing is almost like when imitation turns to comparison, we've lost it's almost like imitation should get us to a point at which we can then express who we are, that is not imitative of anything, but is actually revealing what only we can bring.
That's right.
But sometimes it seems to get stuck where we think the imitation itself is not just the learning process, but is that actually some kind of proving process.
Yeah, and you know, your image of Puss in Boots putting on the boots, it made me think of the song, These Boots Are Made for Walking. Right. I forget who sang it.
I think it was Nancy Sinatra.
Oh, was it? So I want to say, I think part of what was going on there, and I think this is important about accessing our richness, is the image of putting on the boots, and these boots that are made for walking constellated a feeling in you of aliveness and of wanting to walk the way you want to walk. And so there is a place where imitation connects to image. And when we pay attention to the images that make us feel alive, that get us wanting to, in this case, walk in the way we want to walk, then I think that's a way we tap into the richness of who we are. The imitation, when it gets separated from what the image constellates in your body, is where we disconnect from our richness and try to be like somebody else.
I see, when we're cutting ourselves off.
We cut ourselves off.
Now, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I'm sort of known for wearing these cowboy boots on stage that have bling on them. And literally I would just take necklaces and earrings and put them on my boots, and that's how I would wear them. And I remember the moment at which it became okay for me to do that. So I was a symphony soloist, and I was on tour. I think it was with Boston Pops, and I was dressing like what I thought a symphony soloist should look like, kind of, sort of, with high heels, which was difficult because I'm not great at walking in high heels. And we went to Texas, and I think I went out, and somebody took me out, and I bought cowboy boots, and I thought, this audience they're wearing cowboy boots. Mm-hmm. It's going to be okay for me to do that. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first time that I walked on stage with, an electric harp and my gown and cowboy boots. And so I have to thank Texas for that and for making that okay.
Yeah.
So where does that fit into? Because Texas connected me to Puss in Boots.
Well, again, the image of Texans wearing cowboy boots.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah,
yeah, and it's a culture where that's okay. It doesn't mean
Yeah, it was the image of the Texan wearing the cowboy boot versus the image of the farmer wearing the cowboy boot or the work boot, or
which is also a really important image to me as well.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in the farm, and the people who wore boots were the people who were doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. So
there's a talisman. It's almost like there's a talisman that helps bring the richness of who we are, or there can be.
Absolutely. I mean, I do believe outer world objects like the boot, that is an image that connects us to something of our richness, can become a talisman. You put the boot on and it helps you step in to your own richness, to your own way of expressing, even on the symphony stage with your gown on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is going to be, and I think I know the answer, how can we bring more of that richness into our lives as human beings? Mm-hmm. And then how do we add it as in our self-expression, whether we're musicians or artists or just in the human being and how we dress? Some people, that's where their self-expression is happening.
Yeah, so I would say pay attention to the images that create a feeling of aliveness in your gut. Where during your day do you feel something in you like spark up, or like a fire start to burn? Pay attention to those things, and begin then to live with those images. Begin to play with them, just like you played with the cowboy boots. And I think the image, for Jung, he said it, the image is the language of the unconscious. And the unconscious self we are is always far bigger than the conscious self we are. So if we're playing with image, then we're bridging to all these resources of who we are in the unconscious that we don't yet know about, or we're not yet able to call up at request. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. So that becomes the engine of self-expression.
I think that's a great analogy. Yeah.
Now, I know that there are many times when the thing I want to do is something I dare not do, or I feel like I don't have the right to do that. I don't have the right to wear cowboy boots, or I don't have the right to wear a short skirt, or like I'm to this. So there's something about daring, like do what you dare not do. Mm-hmm. Can that be part of the equation, and where would it fit in the equation?
Well, I think it fits in the equation in that, for instance, if we go back to your analogy about the first time you wore the cowboy boots, there was a bit of daring because you broke the norm. You broke the collective norm of what a symphony performer wears. You went against the collective current. So I believe when we live from our richness, we often are going against the collective current, whether it's the collective, in this case of the symphony, and all those decades of this is what the symphony player wears, or you're going against the norm of the family. because you're doing something in a totally different way than your parents or grandparents or siblings ever did it.
Well, and it's interesting because my experience, I believe you, and my experience was that there were two collective consciences, traditions, two collective traditions there. One was the tradition of the symphony soloist and what she should look like, which I was breaking already and musically, but still trying to look like one. And then there was the tradition that the audience lived in, which is cowboy boots are beautiful and can be dressy, and they represented at that, and then they represented my role, my role being an ambassador to the world of music and imagination. That's my job as I see it. And so when I'm a symphony soloist, I am the ambassador for the audience into that world. And in that moment, being in Texas, I think I just realized it allowed me, that opened up. So I didn't have to feel like I was going against anything. I felt like I was going towards that connection.
Right. And often our expansion of consciousness, meaning often our conscious connection to something of the richness in us we've not known before, does come to us because we are exposed to other norms, to other traditions. And sometimes they come from something inside of us that we've not yet encountered in the outer world, but we're introducing. And I'm thinking now about your song Catcher in the Rye, and the different feeling of that and the different emotion and image that conveys as compared to the Nightingale. Both came from the crude oil of uncreative spirit.
And for people who don't, I just want to describe the difference.
Yeah.
So Nightingale is very, very gentle, and has strings and stuff. And the Catcher in the Rye, while it starts out sort of Celtic, it then becomes this extremely I don't know how to describe it, like pounding, pulsing with the timpani, this incredible solo with the timpani or drums or whoever I'm playing with. And it's raw emotion of connection. So I see what you're saying, different. Okay, so anyway, go on what you were saying.
Yeah, but I think that's a place where, when you've told the story about that song and how it got set aside for a number of years, that at the moment you were introducing that, there wasn't already another collective out there inviting you. There was something inside of you were bringing forth. So that took a different kind of daring than the wearing of the cowboy boots.
That's right. And I realized that, so the story about what happened was the first time I tried to share it, I didn't know how to share it well. And somebody who was watching me do that made a face, and I was so embarrassed. I hid the whole piece for years. And what I'm realizing in this moment, I've been identifying other times like that in my life when I felt like I was squirming like a worm. When I was sharing something vulnerable. Something just happened recently where I was sharing something with my students, and I was just uncomfortable the whole time. And then afterwards they were just like, this is great, this is exactly what I wanted, like, no, thank you for being vulnerable. And I began to understand that for me, success creatively often feels like worms. So it doesn't feel like, haha, I did it. It feels like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. Oh. So, and I'm glad that you reminded me of Catcher in the Rye, because that was a moment where I felt those worms and I was like, well, then close that jar right now. That's going away. That's not happening. So I'm beginning to understand in terms of richness that as we open, I'm learning that the feeling I need to go for is not the feeling of like, ha, I did it.
Right.
Look at me. The feeling I actually need to go for is like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. I can't believe I'm sharing this. I don't, am I really doing this? that is actually the path.
Yeah, the worms are always where rich earth is.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so the
They're
richness
earthworms.
where the worms are, and the worms are all of those automatic, unconscious creative processes that are breaking down what becomes the rich earth.
Well, worms actually create.
Yeah.
They literally eat garbage and create on the other end rich earth. That is their job.
Yeah.
And their joy. I don't know if they're joyful, but wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've gone from an oil well to worms, which I think is great. I think that's the perfect one. I mean, we're going from, I mean, that's what we want to do in our earth as well, is go from an oil well to an earthworm.
That's right.
So as we leave our listeners, me being the most important one, me being the one who listens to most of what you say, what do we leave them with? I mean, I leave them with, I was not aware of this feeling until recently. I was not aware of it as the feeling that identifies me opening the riches of my life. I just thought it felt icky. So I don't know that I would know how to help anybody else identify that in their lives, because really I can only think of 3 times when I've done it, successfully, meaning I stayed in the experience and didn't run away from it.
Well, my guess is you've done it a lot more, but it hasn't been to the extreme degree as those 3 times.
Okay.
Yeah, would be my guess, that you have had this experience, but those are 3 that are just glaring, like you can't miss them.
Right.
I think if we work with the 3, with the image of the oil well and the earthworm, so that the takeaways, the first thing I would say to people is look at where your energy is gushing. Where does your energy just gush out and get lost? And begin to, first of all, notice that, and then begin to talk to that energy, feel into what it wants, and play with how you might creatively channel it. That would be the first thing. So just like the oil well has to have all of the tubes and things to get the oil up in a way it can be used, we have to create that through consciousness, by consciously being aware and dialoguing and relating to what's coming up. The second thing I would say is once you've begun to have that structure in place of relating to the energy and seeing where it's getting spewed out, then begin to do what the worm does and digest it. Digest it meaning use your imagination to play with how you might express this energy. If you can't come up with anything on your own, Google.
Right. Well, yeah, or take a class. I mean,
or take a class.
That's pretty much what I'm always teaching. And what many people who are going to teach you concepts are going to teach.
Yes.
And I find that sometimes if I go and take one little lesson and not try to get it all, but I'll get that one thing I need from that.
Yeah. And so take a class. So do what the worm does. And in doing what the worm does, we can do to the third thing, which is take the lesson of the cowboy boot. And when you're in an environment where you're being invited into a different way of expressing that feels authentic to you, do it. Take it. Take the bridge for when you're being invited. You took the bridge of Texas to put on those boots that were made for walking and working.
Well, they were made for playing harp.
And for playing harp, And so use the lesson of the boots. And when you're in an environment with people who have a larger consciousness or a different consciousness, and you have energy to try something new, do it.
Okay, I love that. So those are 3 things, and I'm going to go over those same 3 things. So you said, look for where your energy is gushing. And I'm going to say, and remember that when it comes out, everything comes out slimy. Kittens come out slimy. They're, that's how it is. So don't judge it when it comes out. Just experience the richness of it, and experience the fact that, hey, that's where I'm gushing, and I may feel shame about sharing that place because I may not know how to share it in a way that others can actually experience it yet. So it takes the refinement process is not about inhibiting it or chiseling it or anything like that. It is about learning how to take that thing that you are bringing to the world, or you've been given to bring to the world, that you have, and the refinement of how are you actually going to get it into other people's consciousness so that they can experience some of what you're experiencing, or that they experience something they need to experience. And so it's often a refining in terms of getting rid of all the stuff so that it's simple enough and pure enough or distilled enough that you can more easily express it. And then, there was one, and the cowboy boots, right. And that there are probably things even around us in our lives that we've saved because we love them, but we're not, we haven't invested in them. We haven't made we haven't invested our richness in them by making a shrine out of them or appreciating them. So that appreciation, so the acceptance, that, when it comes out, it's slimy, we accept it. And then we refine it and appreciating all along, and then keep adding appreciation, because that's what makes riches richer and richer and richer and richer, is when they appreciate and are appreciated. Yes?
Yeah, we connect, we live with the energy that they constellate or that gets activated in us.
Oh, I see. So then they've come from our energy, but as we start expressing them, they start even creating more energy or being a conduit for energy.
Right. It's like fanning the fire of our own spirit.
Great. Okay, so this is how to get rich.
Yes.
Experience or the riches. Any last things you want to say, Kathleen?
No, have courage and be rich in yourself. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and daring. And I want to say thank you for the richness of this conversation and the ongoingness and riches of this conversation.
Well, you're welcome. And it comes up together from both of us.
Right. That's important to know. That's an important thing to bring there. Yeah. That it is happening out of collaboration.
That's right.
Beautiful. Okay. Kathleen, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Terrific. Bye-bye.
Oh, wait, we said we'd play. We didn't say we could at least play a note on our harp.
Oh, a note on our harps.
Wait. Oh, mine isn't even on.
Mine is not tuned.
I don't know why. Oh, I love this. I love that we can't actually do this thing.
So my favorite simple song is St. Columba.
Very nice.
I did it.
Well done. Well done. So, okay. So in that case, I will play one of my favorite songs. And my harp isn't in tune either. And I'll just play the first part of it. It's called Happy Song. Oh, it's so out of tune. Let me pull that up. Okay. Whoops. By the way, these wires are because I was experimenting putting a bicycle light on my harp.
Okay.
That's what's going on there. So. goes on from there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, these are both beautiful. I'm glad we shared them. Now we can try in the future to see if we can play together. I know it's hard because there's a disconnect, but there's always a disconnect. I mean, there's a disconnect in time.
Yeah, the sound, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But hey, we did it, and we did it without planning on it. Okay.
I know it.
See you next week. Okay.
All right. Bye.